So this is the 2014 Junior Cert Higher Level Paper 2 and we're looking at question number 3. All of the students in a class took IQ Test 1 on the same day. A week later they all took IQ Test 2. Their scores on the two IQ tests are shown in the tables below. So we've got IQ Test 1 and IQ Test 2 here. Part 1 says draw a back-to-back stem and leaf plot below to display the students' scores. Okay, so stem and leaf diagram or stem and leaf plot. So I'm going to do IQ Test 2, the one on the right. So I'm going to try and do them in order as I go. I'm going to do an ordered stem and leaf diagram from the beginning. So the lowest number here that I can see is 83. So if I'm putting 83 in, that means there's a stem of 8 and a leaf of 3. So it would be 80 and then 3 here. So I'm going to cross that off. After 83, the next lowest, there's nothing else in the 80s, and then up to the 90s. So 90s, I've got 94. I've got two 97s. 7, and I've got a 99 before I'm into the hundreds. So in the hundreds I've got 102 and 105. So 102, 105. I then have 106. Oh, not 107. So 106 and 108 twice. 106 and then 108, which is there twice, before I am then up to 111 twice, so 111 and 111. Then I've got 114, 117 and 120. So 114, 117 and 120 will be down here. So that's IQ Test 2 done. Now, just be careful when you're doing the back-to-back stem and leaf. You always keep the lowest numbers closest to the stem. So when I'm starting with the lowest value I can see this time, which is 79, I'm going to put the 9 in here, close to the stem of 7. So 79, then I'm going up to the 80s. I have 86, 89, they're the only two 80s. 86, and then outside that 89. After that we're looking at the 90s. So I have 94, I think is the next lowest, 94, and then two 96s and a 97. So 94, 96, 96 and 97. Then I'm looking at the hundreds. So I've got 103, 104 twice, and 105. So 103, 104 twice, and 105. And then finally I have 111. Oh, there's a 108 down here, which I nearly missed. 108, which goes in there as well. Then I'm on to 111, 115, and 119. So 111, 115, and 119. So there's my back-to-back stem and leaf diagrams done. It does ask for a key, so remember for a key you just show something like 8, stem of 8 and a leaf of 3, that means 83. Okay, so that's the key that works for both diagrams. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. Part 2 then says find the range of scores for each IQ test. Well, the range is the largest value, subtract the smallest value. So for the IQ test 1, you've got 119 minus 97. 119 minus 97. Sorry, not minus 97, that's actually minus 79. Be careful there, 79. Minus 79, that gives me an answer of 40. And then for IQ Test 2, we had 120 minus 83. So 120 minus 83, and that gives me 37. So the range is slightly bigger for IQ test 1, the range being the spread. That's how spread out the values are from biggest to smallest. Part 3 says find the median score for each IQ test. Okay, the median will be the middle number when the scores are ordered. So because the stem and leaf diagram is ordered already, what I can do now is I can start crossing off. So I can cross off the, starting with the biggest, I'm going to go cross off the biggest, then the smallest. Biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest. So I can see there that my mean, or my median rather, my middle number is 103. Because I started with the biggest, I finished with the smallest. So that's not 3, by the way, that's 103. So 103 is the median for IQ test 1. For IQ test 2, we're going to do the same thing. So we'll cross off the biggest, smallest, biggest, and just be careful as you're moving from row to row. Smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, biggest, smallest, leaving me with one number in the middle, which is 106. So 106 is the median for IQ test 2. Okay, part 4 then says find the mean score for each IQ test. Well, the mean is when you add up all the scores and divide by how many there are. So if I add up all of these scores here, if I add all them up in my calculator, that gives me 1506. And if I add up all the scores in IQ test 2, you can do this from the stem and leaf as well, but it's just as easy from the table. We're just adding them up. That gives me a score of 1572. So if that's the case, then if it's 1572, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. So there's 15 scores in each case. So we're going to divide each of these by 15 to get the mean. So it's going to be 1506 divided by 15. For IQ test 1, that gives me a mean of 100.4. And for IQ test 2, it's 1572 divided by 15. And that gives me a score of 104.8. So there are my mean scores for both. Okay, part 5. Compare the scores of the two IQ tests. Refer to at least one measure of central tendency. So central tendency is just another word for average. And the type of averages we have then are mean, median. They're the ones that we have done in this question, so it'll be referring to them. The other type of average, by the way, is mode, but we haven't worked that out, so we're just going to be referring to either the mean or the median. So that's referring to at least one of them, mean or median, and at least one measure of variability or spread. So spread is, measure of spread that we look at is the range. That's the range. So we're going to compare the ranges and compare the median or the mean. Okay. Right. So let's compare the central tendencies first. It says refer to at least one, but that means you could refer to both. So I'll just refer to both. So if we go back, we can see here that for IQ test 2, the median and the mean is higher than for IQ test 1. So IQ test 2 has a higher mean and median than IQ test 1. So that means we could say in general the scores are higher in IQ test 2. If the mean and the median is higher, we can say that in general the scores are higher in IQ test 2. So that's the central tendency, and then the variability we can see if we go back to the range. The range for IQ test 1 is slightly more spread out. So we can say range for IQ test 1 is slightly higher than that of IQ test 2. So we can say that the spread of the scores are more spread out. Or the spread is bigger in IQ test 1. Okay, finally, part 6 says, Marshall says that every student in the class must have done better on IQ test 2 than on IQ test 1. Is Marshall correct? And explain your answer. Well, if we go back and look at the values here, we don't know that everybody did better in IQ test 2 than IQ test 1 because the lowest value of IQ test 2 was 83 and the highest value in IQ test 1 is 119. So that means that somebody could potentially have got 119 in IQ test 1 and they could have got less than that in IQ test 2, so they could have got any number less than that. So that's what we need to say. The answer, is Marshall correct? No, he's not correct. And the explanation is the max score on IQ test 1 is greater than the min score on IQ test 2. That's our reason. So that's the end of part 6 and the end of question 3.